All right. Well, it is 11:30. It's time for us to get started. Well, good morning. I appreciate everybody joining us today, especially on a spring break week. So it must be either time to kill or you're just ready to enjoy our wonderful next financial roadmap series. My name is Mitch Cook. I'm a retirement plan advisor here at Excel Wealth Management. Today, I'll be going through some really key what I would consider fundamental and foundational information when it comes down to your overall finances. So it's not just make your money work harder for you, but it's really what are some of those things to help us build that foundation so we could take advantage of that. Before I get started, if you do have any questions, definitely ask those questions in the Q&A box. We will be taking those questions at the end of this series. So if any time along the way, if you do have any questions or anything that pops up, please let us know. As always, we have our required financial and FINRA disclosure. What this is really meant for is just making sure that you know this is an education purpose only series and that your personal situation needs to be looked at individually or as a household. So let's get started. Like I said, really looking at today, it's knowing your current financial situation. And that's going to be a big part of that, what I would consider the launchpad of your financial future. These are some of those key things that we'll be highlighting, making sure that every dollar that you're saving has that opportunity for decades of growth. And really, what does that look like? Making some of those small changes. If going through today, you determine there are some of those things that you need to work on as part of your financial foundation, what are those things that could be helping you further with that growth? And then what are some of those things that you might be able to really start with today and make that money work for you? Crushing that debt, building that savings, taking advantage of a workplace retirement program. These are going to be some of those key things that you may want to take away from today and really start working on maybe for the next month or for the remainder of the year. I really wanted to highlight some key statistics. And for those of you that may have joined some past webinars, we did highlight some of these before, but it is very important for us to understand that. As number one, 50% of Americans have less than 10,000 saved. This is pretty important, and I'll highlight a little bit more what that means from generations in the next slide. The debt. There's an average household credit card debt of over $10,000. And this has drastically increased since 2023. This is telling us that people are utilizing more of their credit cards for emergencies because they may not have the right savings in place to help pay for that. And then the last one, about 60% of households have access to a retirement savings account, whether that's a 401k, 403b, retirement type of an account. But depending on your ethnicity, that is actually a bigger gap. So these are some of the things that we think about when we're working and talking with individuals. So this is what we know. And as I mentioned, when we take a look at those that have more than $10,000 in savings, we also take a look at really who doesn't have any savings. And nearly 30 to 40% have no savings at all. And so these are some of those gaps that we're looking at. How do we control this as we look moving forward? And as we work hard and as we continue to either get pay increases, what do we need to be doing along the way to make sure that we're taking advantage that money's working for us? So why does now matter so much? Time. It's either going to be our ally or our enemy. And when we think about time, it comes down to compounding. And compounding can work to our advantage or it can work against us, depending on what we're using it for, whether it's for saving or if it's for debt. So making sure that we understand that. and getting those habits in place early on. If you're in your 20s or 30s, um, these are the great times to be able to establish those habits for those savings and that debt management. And you can definitely look at recovering if you get off track, but it can become a lot more harder or more expensive as we get later in life to try to get out of that. One of the best sayings that I've had is from Warren Buffett when it comes down to this topic. It is he made a comment saying, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." And really that means that you need to be disciplined and taking a look at this is an area you want to concentrate on and then work through how that would look within your budget. When we're younger, we think we have the time on our side. And when we take a look at that, we think, oh, I can just kick that can down the road. I'm making enough money right now. And down the road, I'll make a little bit more money. You might rely a little bit on credit card debt in the beginning, and those little things start to add up over time. By the time you hit your late 20s and early 30s, you might be considering other purchases. And one of those that we see is buying a house or getting another car. And you're thinking, all right, I'll just continue to make more money down the road. And you're always thinking of your future self will take care of that for you. By the time you hit your 30s and beyond, your future self looks back and thinks, boy, I wish I wouldn't have done those things. Maybe I should have changed the way I either bought that bigger house early on. I really tied up a lot of my cash in there, or I should have set aside a little bit more money when I was younger. So these are some of those things we take a look at is when you really don't have a solid financial plan in place, money then becomes reactive instead of intentional. Bills, the surprises, and trust me, surprises will come along the way. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received is when my wife and I went through birthing class, and she was asking everybody, what do you have as a birthing plan? Are you going to get an epidural? Are there things that are going to take place that day? And the best advice that this birthing nurse gave us was expect the unexpected, and then you're prepared. And so the one thing we don't want to have is be reactive. We need to be a little bit more proactive. It's not just saving whatever's left over, which often is zero. And it's doing that, what I look at drifting for years, and then the anxiety and the stress kicks in, and then you're scrambling to catch up. And that catch up down the road is a little bit more costly, expensive. As mentioned before, compounding can work in two ways. When debt owns you, the compounding has a pretty big effect, and it's usually a negative effect. And this is where it can make it very difficult on how we can get that money to actually work for you. Credit cards, personal loans, the buy it now later, it really can start eroding that cash flow. Interest rates on what I would consider high interest debts like credit card, it's between 15 to 25%. Right now, savings accounts, you can get a high yield savings account for right around 3 to 4%. But if you have a lot of debt, you still have negative flow taking place there. So it's really how that debt can crowd out that investing and really what that solid foundation would be down the road. So what does that debt really look like? And this gives a pretty good example. As I mentioned, the average household credit card debt is around $10,000. Well, what if you did just the minimum monthly payments of $10,000? If you paid that off over a year, that payoff over that time is $11,112. So a little over $1,000 that you're paying in extra interest. But what if you were doing that over 5 years? Well, now you're paying almost $15,000, $16,000 on a $10,000 debt. But as you can see, the longer term that it takes us to pay that debt off, If you did that over 10 years, we're now looking at $23,000. So for that $10,000 debt, you paid over $13,000 extra to pay that off. One of the things that a lot of individuals may get caught up in is if they start going down that debt route and it becomes very difficult and they're barely paying those monthly payments, it could also affect their credit score. And this has a secondary effect. And in this example, what we're taking a look at is what does that effect look like if someone has good credit score versus okay? And in this scenario, we have two individuals that are looking to purchase a car for $25,000, a 5-year auto loan. And this gives a pretty good idea of where that interest would fall. Someone who has good credit would get about 4% interest, whereas someone who has okay, it'd be about 10% interest. That's about $70 a month difference. In this particular case, that's $4,200 in that 5 years. Where this impacts you is those individuals, if they were to take that $4,200, that if they would have good credit and apply that as a long-term retirement savings growth, if we take a look at just a moderate performance on this type of an account over 30 years, that $4,200 equates to over $42,000. So not only does that debt impact you, especially if it's a high interest debt, it could impact you on your credit score, and therefore you're paying more for what you need for that debt. In the end, it could have this amount of impact where that savings alone, if we were to have better credit, not as much debt, could have almost 10 times more in savings over that 30-year time period. As I mentioned, a few $1,000s at high interest, it can turn into paying back much more. And that is really the biggest thing, is understanding where that debt can be eroding that future growth for you. Every dollar to that lender is benefiting them, not you. As I mentioned early on, time, it's your ally or your enemy. And the compounding, especially with debt, it is definitely not your ally. Now, if we're impacted by debt or what I would consider uncertain financial savings, this is where part of this is waiting to invest and what that impact is if we're not able to invest and start that savings. A lot of individuals feel that, I'll start saving later on. And then they get more and more compounding of either debt, or they just don't get started because they don't know where to start, especially if there's not that financial plan in place. Some people could be scared of the current markets, and that fear alone right there could keep you from getting invested. The biggest part is waiting 5 to 10 years on really what that impact could look like. And a lot of times, just that waiting that 5 to 10 years could cost you double the amount that you may need to save down the road to get you caught up. So what does that really look like? If we take a look at time in this particular case, we took a look at 3 individuals setting aside money at 3 different times over a certain length of time. We have Michael, Ashley, and Courtney in this particular example. And Michael started at 35, Ashley started at 21, and Courtney started at 21. But the amount of time that they were in the market for how long made a big difference. Michael saved for 32 years, and in each year it was $3,000. All 3 of them had $3,000 a year. So for Michael, he saved for 32 years, and that was a total of $96,000. We're looking at what I would consider a growth rate of about 7% in this scenario. Over that 32 years, that $96,000 equated out to about $342,000. Ashley started right at age 21, set aside $3,000, and she only did it for 14 years, and then she stopped at 35. She put in $42,000. And this is where that compound growth really takes effect when you start early on. Because she started early on, even though that she saved a lot less than what Michael did, she had time on her side. And her account it grew to about 610,000. And then Courtney started at 21 and went all the way through for 46 years. And she nearly ended up with $1 million by putting in 138,000. So this really gives us a pretty good understanding of what that looks like if we get started early. Here's another way of looking at it as well. What if we wanted to have a certain dollar amount in retirement? In this particular case, let's say you have someone earning $50,000 and they want to have right around 500,000 in retirement. And in this case, by age 65. In each one of these scenarios, it gives us an understanding of what that cost would be to us for how much we would have to save by delaying that. If you were 25 today, in order to get $500,000 at age 65, you would be putting away about 5% of your pay, $2,500 a year. That would be a total of $100,000 that you would contribute in order for you to accomplish and get $500,000. If we take a look at delaying that, if I said, I'm kicking that can down the road and now I'm 35, I need to start. Well, you would essentially need to do almost double that percentage. So instead of 5%, you're going to have to do about 10% of your pay in order to accomplish that same $500,000 by delaying that by 10 years. But let's say you're now 45 and you're thinking, I really need to catch up for the next 20 years. You would need to set aside at least 25% of your pay in order to get and feel comfortable that you're going to get to that $500,000. That's nearly 5 times the amount and percentage-wise that you would need to set aside in order to accomplish that $500,000. So this is where that delay definitely catches up to you. We do get asked that question of how much will I need when it comes to retirement? And this gives us a pretty good general rule of thumb. By the time you're 30, you should have about 1 times your annual salary. So if you make about $50,000 a year, you should have about $50,000 saved. By the time you're 50, it's about 6 times that. So we should have about $300,000 if we're making $50,000. This gives a pretty good general rule of thumb, but when it comes down to truly preparing for retirement, it's really sitting down to understand what does your plans look like in retirement. And so that's going to impact it as well, but this gives a pretty good idea of really where are you at from an overall savings and maybe what are some of the areas that you need to concentrate on. When we do take a look at kind of building that financial plan, it's start out simple. Don't dive in and get too complex. Know your numbers. What's your income? What's your fixed bills? Look at your debt. Look at your overall savings. What are those things that you have today? And then look at how you want to divide that income up. Give every dollar a job, making sure that you're accomplishing those short, mid, or long-term goals, what you're looking to do. And that could be paying off debt, and that could be that long-term investing. And then automate as much as possible, because in your 20s, you may have the time to work through and look at those details and really dig into it. But by the time you get into your 30s and maybe 40s, there may be other things in life that really consume your time and responsibilities, whether it's family, job, whatever that may be. And setting those automations will help along the way. One of the biggest things that will work against you is debt. So as we would say, crush it, especially if it's bad debt, that credit card or high interest debt. We know that saving is important. And sometimes you may think, well, I need to set aside, but if you're putting still money on a credit card and you're building that debt, it's really working against you. The key is you got to get that debt under control, and especially that high interest debt. And so it's prioritizing that and taking a look at it. Determine what is the best way to attack, whether it's the snowball method or the avalanche method. And we're more than happy to go through what those methods look like for you if this is an area that you need some help with. But this is going to be one of those key things. If you want your money to work for you and debt is part of the problem, in order for us to start effectively getting that money to work for you, we got to get the debt under control first. Then we can start building that saving buffers. A lot of times people may get into debt because they have an emergency and then they finally get things managed and then they have another emergency. So it's starting small. Again, it's looking at and having every dollar count and have a job. And if part of that dollar is to start building that emergency fund so you don't have to put it on a credit card, this is going to be one of those areas. You may need to set up a separate account, set up that automation, and start building that emergency fund for you. That cash will act as that buffer, and that is going to be key. So we just really need to make sure that having these two things working towards each other to help really get that money to work for you. Now, for those of you that have a company retirement program, a big key to that is taking advantage of that retirement program. Setting up the automations, whether it's the savings coming right out of your paycheck going into the plan. Majority of 401k plans have high quality, low cost investments. And many of them have diversified investment portfolios to make it easy for you to allocate into them. The biggest key is if your company provides a match, making sure to take advantage of that match first. That is going to boost that savings very quickly and give you kind of what we would call an immediate return on the money that you're putting in. So these are going to be some of those key factors. Along the way, it's also adjusting what that savings is for you. And as you get a pay increase, one of the best things to do is pay yourself first. Maybe look at increasing your savings along the way. And a lot of retirement plans will actually have automatic increase features built in, where if you know that you are looking to get a pay increase, typically every January, you can set that pay increase up from your paycheck going into your retirement plan, maybe that every January. So these are some of those things to make sure that your 401k is working to your advantage. And when I say take advantage of the full match, this is an example of why that is so impactful. In this particular case, I'm looking at a match formula that provides a dollar for dollar or 100% on the first three, and then 50% of the next two. If you were to only put away 3%, you're only taking advantage of that first part of the match. And in this scenario, we looked at 30 years of what that contribution over 30 years would look like in that growth rate. In this and showing what that growth and return, it would be a little over 340,000. But if you were able to take advantage of that full match, which means that you would need to do at least 5% to get a 4% match, that overall growth rate plus that added contribution, you'd be at that about $500,000 over those 30 years. So taking advantage of the match is crucially important. And while debt is still one of those key things that you want to tackle, if your company provides a match contribution and you are not taking advantage of it, that would be one of the other areas I would at least make sure that you're doing. We understand that investing can be confusing, and sometimes the fear of the markets can keep you from investing. But let's look at really what we know about investing in general. And here are some of those do's and don'ts. And keep in mind, this is just general. So do invest regularly, even small amounts, and staying consistent through the markets. They're going to help you. That's that dollar cost averaging. If you have that automation set up with inside the your workforce retirement plan, that's really where this comes in. Don't chase hot tips, emotions, reacting to headlines. These sometimes have more bigger impacts and detriments if you're making those decisions on those short-term situations. So oftentimes than not, that panic actually has a bigger impact to you. The key is to focus on the time in the market, not perfect timing. Trust me, if I had perfect timing, I'd have an island somewhere. It would be pretty amazing to be able to know when the markets are going to go up and down. But a lot of emotions, a lot of things now because of social media can drive some of those unnecessary panics. The other part is don't wait on the sidelines, especially if you have cash that you're looking to invest. The key is understanding what is that cash meant for? Is it meant for short-term goals? Whether that's you're looking to have a purchase within the next 6 to 12 months. Is it a midterm goal, which is kind of that 1 to 3 years, or is it a long-term goal for that cash? And knowing how that cash is going to work for you, making sure that you have a job and what that job is for that money. Here's what that impact would look like if we were to take a look at, in this particular case, over a long-term opportunity cost on 30 years in the market. In this particular case, it's looking at the a 60-40 bond portfolio over the past 30 years. And if we were to keep that in a cash account and we were putting in $1,000, so $12,000 a year over those 30 years, what would that opportunity cost be? In this particular scenario, you'd have a little over $500,000 in cash. But if we were to do that dollar cost averaging, invest in the markets with its ups and downs over those past 30 years, it would be nearly $1 million more over those same 30 years. So that opportunity cost really comes down to what do we want that money to do for us? And so having a balanced portfolio, having an understanding with how the markets work are definitely parts of that, and knowing what your risk tolerance is. So putting it all together, what are some of those things that we want to make sure that we're looking on? And that is really, what are some of the pitfalls that we have today? Is it debt? Is it having no plan? Are we not using the 401k plan or 403b, depending on what you have as a retirement plan, to the best of our ability? It's taking advantage of what we have in place. And then kind of decide on one concrete step and really hone in on that. Small steps is key. If we bite off more than we can chew, it can definitely have an impact on what we do and whether or not we may stop. But just remember, progress beats perfection. It does not have to be perfect. And you may need to make adjustments along the way. Life is not consistent. There is always going to have inconsistencies. There's going to be those surprises, no matter how often you try to control it, but it's having those other safety features in place. And that could be building an emergency fund so it doesn't compound on that debt for you. So action steps. I mean, the biggest part is knowing what you need to do today. The biggest cheerleader you're going to have is your future self. Your future self is going to be your biggest advocate on those little changes that you do today. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just getting started. And if debt is causing you from the saving, we're more than happy to work through that conversation with you on where to start, how to start, helping you with the budgeting, if that's something that you need some help with. So schedule some time this week. If you do have a little bit of time to go through and take a look at your overall income, where's the money going? Where's the bills? And see where it may be beneficial to start. If you do have that credit card debt or any high interest debt, take a look at what can be done to try to reduce that. And so for us, it's just making sure that you have the right tools, resources available at your fingertips. So again, if you do have any questions or would like just to have a consultation, our team and I are here to definitely help give that guidance for you.